Did the entire internet just go dark? For a few hours last week, it may have seemed like it. News sites, food delivery apps, even smart home devices all started glitching at once. There were reports of people locked out of their homes. And believe it or not, it all comes back to that company where you buy your AA batteries for overnight delivery, Amazon.com. I'm Josh. I'm a software exec with almost 2 decades of experience in the software industry. And on this channel, we go inside the secrets of the software industry. Today, let's talk about one of the widest known facts inside software, but rarely discussed outside the industry. That about a third of the websites and apps and services that you use are entirely dependent on Amazon. That sounds crazy, right? I mean, they sold books and now they run the internet. How does that even work? So when you go to a website, you might think that you're visiting that company's site, but the site actually lives on someone else's computer. And that computer is usually in a huge warehouse owned by one of three companies: Microsoft, Google, or Amazon. See, websites, they need somewhere to live, but most websites don't actually own their own houses. They just rent them. And there's really just three rental companies around. One of them is Amazon, which calls their hosting service AWS, or Amazon Web Services. There's Google, which is called Google Cloud Platform, or GCP, and then Microsoft, which named their platform Azure for unknown reasons because they're Microsoft. And really, when you hear someone refer to the cloud or say that something is hosted in the cloud, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about websites that rent their home from one of those three providers. So you're probably most familiar with Amazon, the online store that you go to that you can buy literally anything and then get it shipped to your home the next business day. And at one point, that's what they were. That's all that they did. But bear with me for a quick 30-second history lesson. See, Amazon built an online retailer empire, right? And they had to build a massive hosting infrastructure somewhere to house their website to support that platform. And what happened is over time, they realized that they didn't just have to build it for themselves. They could build out and sell that same infrastructure to other companies all around the world, right? So what started as just a small offshoot of their core business very rapidly became literally their biggest earning business segment, right? By renting out those homes for websites, right, and building this massive infrastructure around that, they even power many of their own competitors, right? Effectively earning from their own competition. So every time you stream a movie or load a website or send data to the cloud, there's a good chance that Amazon is taking a small cut of that. And that's why AWS, Amazon Web Services, is such a big deal. And what's crazy is there's really only three major companies that even do this. Sure, there's a lot of little hosting services that make up a small market share, but almost every major company, every major platform uses either Amazon or Google or Microsoft for their hosting needs. So what happened? How did half the internet go down because of Amazon? So Amazon divides their cloud hosting, right, their rental properties, by region, literally where the massive buildings are located that house those computers, which in turn house those websites, right? And a vast majority of major companies tend to use either the United States East or West Coast data centers. In this case, the primary East Coast data center had an outage. And so anyone who was hanging out there when the data center went offline, they also went offline. And so, that one cluster that happened to be responsible for a major set of websites and apps and services around the globe. And it's crazy because how does a company with as much money and resources and influence as Amazon still have tech that supports so many people go offline, right? It's actually usually not something that's that dramatic. In fact, usually it's something small or really stupid that ends up cascading into something bigger. So often it's something like a tiny mistake and it just snowballs. Maybe it's a bad software update or a misconfigured network switch somewhere, or even something simple like just too many systems restarting at once. And generally, these systems are designed to be redundant, meaning there are backups for backups for backups. But sometimes the problem just hits so deep that there aren't fail safes or they don't work in the way that they're supposed to. So imagine like, every car on a highway. Suddenly everyone tries to take the same detour, right? Even if that detour was great to begin with, you're gonna get traffic and it's gonna become a traffic jam and it's gonna pile up. So when one system fails in the cloud, it causes what's called a cascading failure. It's kind of, it's very similar to a power grid, which delivers electricity, right? So if one of the substations goes offline, all the nearby ones, they suddenly get overloaded trying to handle that extra demand because all of it gets rerouted away from the failing one to all of those other nodes in the system, right? And the same thing happens in the cloud. If one data center or service crashes, the traffic starts to reroute to others. But if there's too many systems that do that all at once, then they all get overwhelmed and it causes that cascading failure. That's why a single small glitch can just ripple out and knock down apps and websites that weren't originally directly affected. Really, it's all kind of a reminder of just how centralized the modern internet has become, right? We like to think of it as a very decentralized system with lots of independent actors working together to create this whole network. But the reality is that we have become entirely dependent on several single entities, large companies like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft for almost all of the traffic on the internet, right? A handful of companies control most of the digital infrastructure that we all depend on. And that means that one company's glitch can ripple out to millions of people in just seconds. And of course, after, every major outage, you hear companies start talking about multi-cloud, right? Meaning they'll spread their systems across different providers so they're not all tied to Amazon. But in reality, most of them will stick with AWS because it's still one of the fastest and cheapest options, right? Maybe we'll get into why companies prefer to rent their property instead of buying their own house in a future video, but that's a topic on its own. Until then, if you found that helpful, please like the video. If you were impacted by the AWS outage, maybe at your job or streaming movies, let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to see more videos on software and the tech industry, follow along with the channel. There will be more coming soon.